Heyo, gamer with taste here. So, I was just watching a video on like this physics professor talking about time and entropy and all that good stuff. And like he was talking about, you know, an egg falls off the counter and crashes onto the floor. Why doesn't it ever just fly back up, rearrange itself, and form an egg again? You push a box across the floor, why doesn't it ever slide back to you? Um, and like, it might seem obvious why it doesn't, but the more you ask yourself the question, it more has to do with physics because physics allows everything to happen in reverse and everything is okay. Like physics doesn't necessarily know what time is. So when you do the physics stuff, it really does beg the question, why doesn't it ever happen the opposite way? Right? So he starts going on and he starts talking about entropy and how everything goes from a higher ordered state to a lower ordered state. And the only way that you get more order in something is by lowering the order in something else. And ultimately, the total order of everything just goes down, right? And he talks about that. But I have a few questions because he also says that for some reason, the universe started in a high ordered state, a low entropic state, right? A state of low entropy. Now, I would like to suggest a couple things which, I have a few questions on. And he also says some things that I'd like to remark about. So I have the whiteboard here. I'm going to talk about it. So, he talks about the egg and how it goes from being an egg and it falls off the counter and smashes on the floor, and now it's just an egg and its yolk and shattered egg pieces. And we're asking, why doesn't it ever fly up off of the floor and rearrange itself into an egg again? Why doesn't that ever happen? The physics allow it, right? Physics doesn't know time. And he's talking about how it's probability. And probability is the whole reason why things go from an ordered state to a less ordered state. And it's because there's more ways to be disordered than there are ways to be ordered. He uses the analogy of a box with a separator in it, and then there's gases on each side of the separator. Two different gases. And you unseparate the two gases and they mix. And he kind of talks about like, well, what's the probability that they rearrange themselves back to the way they were before, with one gas on one side, one gas on the other side? And he says it's possible, but it takes so much time to get there. It would take an incredible amount of time to get there, that if you were to sit and wait for it to happen, you would die first, right? And that's all because of probability. And the likelihood that it's going to be in a mixed state is much, 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 much more likely than if it's going to be in an ordered state with like one gas on one side, one gas on the other side, right? And that's because there's only one way, or a few ways. There's only so many ways for there to be gas on one side, gas on the other, but there's even more ways than that for there to be mixed gas, right? But that doesn't necessarily apply to the egg scenario, in my opinion. The thing is that when he talks about why doesn't the egg ever go backwards? Why doesn't it fly up off the floor, back onto the counter where it fell off, and form an egg again? Like that's not the same question as what you were asking with the box and the gases. With the box and the gases, all you were asking was, what's the probability, like, why don't we ever see it reshape itself, reform itself into one gas on one side, one gas on the other side? Why don't we ever see that happen? And it's like, well, I mean, if you were to live long enough, you could see it happen. Or if you somehow got incredibly magically lucky, you may be able to see it happen, but you would, I mean, the chances are so astronomically low, it won't happen. But the thing is like, it's not the same question, right? He says that physics allows everything to go backwards. And I'm not necessarily doubting that per se, but at the same time, like, there's a reason why the egg doesn't come off the floor and order itself back into an egg and fly up off the floor onto the counter back into a perfectly ordered egg. And the thing is that, is it impossible for that to happen? I mean, maybe not, but what would it take to make that happen? There would have to be like a force that throws it up off the floor in such a perfect way for that to happen. Now, is that impossible? Kind of. I mean, define impossible. Like, you would almost have to have a human create something that would do that. Like, naturally, that would never happen, right? Naturally, there's not going to be a force that just throws the egg back up onto the counter. I don't see that ever being possible unless we invent like a floor that somehow makes the measurements necessary for anything that falls off and lands on it to be thrown back up in the perfect way. I don't know how we could make a floor like that. I don't know how we could walk on a floor like that, but whatever, you know, my point still stands. Like, there would need to be a force. I feel like there's a physics reason why the egg never goes from broken egg spilled onto the floor and flies up into the air and back onto the counter and reforms an egg. I feel like there's a reason for that. With the gases, what he's really asking is it possible for us to see the same state that we saw in the past again in the future? He's not asking that this gas moves back and retraces its steps perfectly and forms its previous state again through the same way that it disorganized. He's just asking, is it possible that the gas somehow finds itself reorganized back into the same state? That's different. In that case, what you're really asking about the egg is, let's say instead of falling on the floor and eating it, or, well, no, I mean, let's say that we throw it on the floor, and it falls on the floor and it shatters, and we clean up the mess and we throw it away. And then once we throw it away, it ends up in a landfill. And then once it's in, or I don't know where it goes, honestly, who cares, whatever. Maybe it goes into the dumpster and a seagull gets into it and starts eating it and flies away. It doesn't eat everything, but it eats some of it and flies away. And then it poops out some of that energy. It uses up some of that energy. You know, processes all happen, but somehow, sometime in the future, at some point, all the same molecules that made up this egg somehow, by some means, find themselves reorganized back into an egg. It's a different question. That is different. I feel like there's a real physics reason why the egg doesn't fly up off of the floor and form a perfect egg again. I feel like there should be a reason for that. But if you're asking why doesn't it ever find itself reorganized into an egg, then I think entropy answers this question. Entropy answers that question pretty well. I mean, maybe entropy answers this question as well, but it's more along the lines of just like the probability of such a force happening to an object is so low. Like I said, we would have to invent a force that does this to the egg, right? So, what's the probability of an intelligent life form inventing such a force and using it on an egg to put it back together after it fell on the floor? I don't know. That's probably pretty low. But once we have that force invented, maybe it's higher. Maybe it's much higher than we expect. You know, like, I don't know. So I feel like this is a different scenario, a slightly different scenario. But then he starts talking about the universe. And he says that the universe was in a highly ordered state. That's what he says. And then the Big Bang happened, and it expanded into a more disordered state. And you had galaxies and stars, human beings. And like, you know, yes, those things are ordered, but as he explains, order uses other things that are ordered and makes them disordered in order to become more orderly. So ultimately, everything else, everything in total becomes more disordered. And at the cost, then that's the cost of making one individual thing more ordered. So, and then, you know, a lot of people are asking, what about the Big Crunch? You know, that's one of the theories about how the universe might end, is will the universe ever find itself back into that ordered state since before the Big Bang? Now, my thing is that we only know one universe. We only know our universe. We don't necessarily know if there's other universes out there, do we? Do we know that there's only one universe? Do we know that there's not a multiverse? I mean, we don't know that there is, but do we know that there isn't? Do we know that there was only ever one Big Bang and it was our universe and only our only our universe? Do we know that there isn't like other Big Bangs happening out there somewhere? Either, you know what I mean? Like, there is the multiverse theory. And if there are multiple universes, then we really don't have the statistical analysis to really say whether or not our universe started out in a low entropy state. We don't really know that. If there are multiple universes out there, for all we know, most universes are this way. And they stay that way almost all the time. And it takes something special to make it expand. We don't know that this is highly ordered, do we? I mean, we definitely don't know what the probability is. If entropy means that we move from low probability situations towards higher probability situations, we don't know what the probability of this state really is. And, I mean, you might be thinking, Matt, I mean, we don't know if there's other universes. What if we just assume that there's only our universe? Because that's the only one we know. Well, I would like to ask you the question, how long was our universe in that ordered state before the Big Bang, where it was condensed and small before it expanded? How long was it like that? Because if it was like that, like 10 times longer than the way it's been now, then across all of all of the existence of the universe so far, if we look at it that way, what's the probability? Like, let's say something exists. There's energy in the universe, right? Probabilistically, probability wise, what's the chances that if you select a state of the universe out of all the time the universe has existed, that you will end up choosing a state of the universe in which it was before the Big Bang? What is that probability? Do we know how high or low that probability really is? what if the universe was in that state for 10 times as long as the universe has been expanded currently, right? What if it's been in that state for 100 times as long as it has been after it's expanded? 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times? At what point do we just accept that the state of the universe expanding is a very low probability, and the state of the universe being concentrated and, as he calls it, ordered? When do we accept that as a higher probability? Now, let's say that the universe has been in that ordered state for 100 times as long as the universe has been expanded currently. But the universe will continue to be expanded for 1,000 times as long as it has been currently. Then which is it? You know? Like, how do we know for certain that this state is an unlikely state? We don't really know that. Especially if there are multiple universes, because we don't have the statistical analysis. We don't have the data to analyze to really know for sure what kind of state this is as far as universes are concerned. We only have the one. So, I mean, if entropy goes from low probability towards high probability, I mean, we don't know what this is. We don't know what this is. We like to say that this is a low probability state, but we don't know that that's true. I mean, it's definitely a low probability, at least I would say it's probably a low probability, that the big crunch is going to happen. But we don't know that either. Not for certain. I mean, we would say that it's probably a low probability that all the matter in the universe, all the energy in the universe somehow compacts itself back in. I would say that makes sense. But to say that it's starting in a compact state is a low probability, that doesn't make sense to me. The idea that, yeah, I'm not sold on that. I'm not sold that we know the probability of this state at all. And what if this right here, what if it does go back into the big crunch and it's just this in between where it's disorderly? What if this is just a blip in the entire line of the universe, right? And so I want to ask, does the Big Bang actually show any kind of entropy at all? If anything, I think the Big Bang is the biggest issue for entropy, because we don't know what the probability of this state truly is. If it is the beginning, I mean, we don't know how long the beginning was, or if this is the prologue, we don't know how long the prologue was before the beginning started to happen, So I don't necessarily buy into the whole entropy thing because of the Big Bang. And when people try to say that the Big Bang somehow plays into entropy and they try to explain it as something that almost proves or explains entropy or something like that, I don't necessarily buy into it at all. I don't think it actually explains anything. I think it confuses the whole idea of entropy in general. So, and I mean, a big part of this conversation was about the flow of time. You know, we only see time flow in one direction. Why don't we ever see it flow the other way? Well, I mean, even if the egg flew up off of the floor and formed itself back into an egg on the counter, time would still be flowing forward. Like, I don't know what you want in that situation. Like, unless you would also, you know, be back where you were when the egg was on the counter, and everything else in the entire universe was back where it was when the egg was on the counter, you know, maybe time can be more localized than that, and maybe only the maybe you can localize all the matter around the egg, and all of that could be affected by whatever is happening to bring it back onto the counter, and only that stuff would be back where it was when the egg was on the counter. But to everything else, time is still going forward. It's only useful for the egg to reform itself back onto the counter if you're there experiencing time going forward while it's experiencing time going back. That's like, I don't know. That those are kind of my whole thoughts on the whole thing. I'm particularly interested in hearing somebody try to explain to me. I don't think I'll get anybody explaining anything to me, but I really don't understand how the Big Bang plays into entropy the way people think it does, because we just don't have the data. We just don't know the probability of that state of the universe. We want to say that it's a low probability that it's in that state, but we don't know for sure. We really, really don't. And, you know, I mean, as time goes on, maybe it is a lower um probability state, but it's only going to be a lower probability state in the whole length of the universe's lifetime, and we're not there yet. Maybe it's about 70% of the universe's life. It was before Big Bang, or was in that state. We don't know if it was ever in this state, in the scattered state, in this high entropy state as it is currently, before the Big Bang as we know it ever happened. Like, did this ever happen to the universe before? Was it ever expanded before the Big Bang all the way out here? We don't know. Like, and once it crunches, will it expand way over here again? We don't know that either. And who knows? If it does behave that way, constantly expanding and contracting back, and big bangs and big crunches happening all the time, maybe it's a 50-50 chance. Maybe it's a 50-50 chance that there's, you know, quote unquote, high entropy or low entropy. Like, to me, entropy is a cool idea, I guess. It's a good way to explain why things don't flow backwards in time, even though physics doesn't necessarily explain why. But it doesn't necessarily work when you look at it in the context of the Big Bang. I think trying to explain it in the context of the Big Bang is a mistake. Like, if you want to explain entropy in a way that makes it make sense, you wouldn't bring up the Big Bang. The Big Bang makes it even more confusing and confounding, and it kind of contradicts itself. And it kind of makes you wonder, well, how do we know for sure what is high and low probability? You know? Anyways, thank you for watching. Hope you have a good one. Hope you continue having good ones. And I hope to catch you on the next video, whenever that may be. I don't know when it will be. I kind of do these whenever I feel like doing them. So, yeah. hopefully you got something out of this, but until the next video, I'm going to have to catch you later. Take care.